Hey, everybody. Welcome to DouglasNow.com's Beyond the Front Page with Robert Preston Jr. I am Robert Preston Jr. And we're taking a little departure from how we typically do our shows, but I think this is a good departure and one that you will find very, very interesting. Now, I'm going to loosely set the stage uh, for our discussion here today, and then we're going to get to our guests and then we're going to have what I think will be an informative and lively discussion about a topic that has placed Douglas and Coffee County, Georgia, directly in the national spotlight. Many of you may be somewhat familiar with, again, at different levels of familiarity with a lawsuit that has been filed regarding some election issues. And Coffee County, through some things that happened in the aftermath of the 2020 election, has been brought into this. Now, this suit is not necessarily related or not specifically related to the 2020 election, but it does involve the 2020 election. And if it seems a little complicated, there's some interesting twists and turns that it takes. But we have with us today Marilyn Marks, the executive director for the Coalition for Good Governance. Now, the Coalition for Good Governance is the organization that began this lawsuit back in 2019. And we're going to go over the history of it and get into the beginnings of the lawsuit, how Coffee County got brought into it, and then what this means moving forward here in 2022 and potentially in 2024. It's a fascinating subject, a fascinating discussion. We're not going to get to everything today. In fact, I know we're going to have to come back at a later date and discuss this issue again multiple times. Probably, I think it's a safe bet to say that as long as Ms. Marks is willing to be a recurring guest here on Beyond the Front Page, we will have her again moving forward. So we're going to bring Ms. Marks on the screen right now. Hey, Marilyn, how are you doing?
I'm great. I just can't thank you enough for inviting me today. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for taking time. And I know there's a lot going on and you're pulled in a number of different directions with this and other issues. And again, we appreciate you taking time out to talk with us. And I know we've got a meandering at times discussion that covers a lot of bases. And I know we're not going to get to everything here today. But what I would like to start out with before we kind of jump to some of the more sensational aspects of what we're dealing with here, give us a little bit of a history with this lawsuit and where it started and how Coffee County got brought into it.
Okay, I'll try and make sure that I'm being clear. Please interrupt me if I'm not. Actually, what this lawsuit is about is to challenge the Dominion voting system as unconstitutional. We actually started this lawsuit in 2017 when we challenged the old D-Bowl system. And if you've been a Georgia voter for a while, you remember the old touchscreen D-Bowl system.
I do very well.
And we demonstrated to the federal court that that system was so unreliable that it was unconstitutional. Judge Totenberg in 2019 agreed that that was in fact the case, and she ruled that state had to get rid of them. And in fact, that's why there was a change in the voting system. But even as they began to follow her order to get rid of them, and then she warned them, she didn't use these words, but don't jump out of the frying pan into the fire. She couldn't order them not to buy the Dominion system, but she kind of warned them. And we warned and screamed and jumped up and down and said, you're going from bad to worse. Don't be buying these touchscreen Dominion, they're called ballot marking devices. Don't go from one bad touchscreen system to another, because it is when we vote on a computer, Robert, we're asking for trouble. As we know, all computers can be hacked, right?
Absolutely.
As opposed to a paper in pen. When you put the ink on the paper, that cannot be hacked. So we're looking for hand-marked paper ballots counted by scanners that can be audited. But The state wanted to choose a touchscreen system. That's what they did. And since 2019, long before the 2020 election, but in 2019, 3 weeks after they signed the contract to buy the Dominion system, we challenged them in court, and the challenge has been going on since. I will just say that shortly before the 2020 election, we had a hearing. Judge Totenberg issued a 147-page opinion, really saying that the Dominion system on these touchscreens was inadequate. She basically said, yes, you all have all the right points about your concerns with the Dominion system. However, it's too close to the election for there to be a change. And so the 2020 election went forward with the Dominion system.
Now, hang on. This suit, this challenge to the Dominion system, was this in Georgia specifically, or was this for all the states? Because I know there's multiple states that use this system. Were these challenges and for all those states?
No, limited bandwidth. You know how that goes. We just focused on Georgia, and we were just in federal court in Georgia. But Robert, we were hoping that when we eventually get this ruling from, which we hope to get from the federal court, that the Dominion touchscreen system, and I want to separate that from the Dominion hand-marked paper ballot system, but the Dominion touchscreen system, that in fact, when the court, we believe, will ultimately order that it is unconstitutional, while it will only directly affect Georgia, what we hope is that other states will go, well, we don't want it either, and voluntarily give it up. So coming back to Douglas County, the kinds of things that happened in Douglas County, and the information that's going to be discovered in Douglas County is going to have nationwide effect. And do you want me to go ahead and jump into why Douglas County suddenly got in the middle of all of this?
You mean Coffee County, but Douglas, Georgia.
Excuse me, Douglas, Georgia. I'm sitting here looking at Douglas now and saying, I'm so sorry. Correct me every time I get it wrong.
I get emails all the time from Douglas County wanting us to publish stuff. And there's also a Douglas in Ireland, I believe it is. And I get all kinds of crazy stuff from Ireland, and I'll read it and then I'll say, well, I'll post your art fair, but I'm not sure if people are going to. I looked it up. I can't remember what it is. I know how many. At one time, I knew how many miles it was from Douglas, Georgia to Douglas, Ireland. I'm not sure that anybody's going to travel very many thousands of miles to visit your third grade art show, but we'll post it, and then they always get a kick out of it. So moving forward, I'm not going to. If we say Douglas County, we mean Douglas, Georgia, and it's very easy to get it confused. So we get
about that. Coffee.
But yeah, if you've got that audio ready.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll go ahead and jump into it.
From a call I got, and then we will talk about it. It's short. It's only about 2.5 minutes.
And I haven't, I'm the guy that chartered the jet to go down to Coffee County to have them inspect all of those computers, and I've heard zero. Okay? I went down there, we scanned every freaking ballot, and the elections director and her assistant lost their job. Okay? And have yet learned zero about all of that effort.
Well, why did they not give you any information?
That's a great question as to why all of that data, we haven't had a report from anybody. And I keep saying, guys, all of that effort, the same people that went up to Michigan, okay, and did all that forensic stuff on the computers, and they sent their team down to Coffee County, Georgia, and they scanned all the equipment, imaged all the hard drives, and scanned every single ballot. Absentee in person, and absentee by mail. And have gotten no feedback.
They imaged the hard drives?
Yes.
How in the world did you get permission to do that?
We basically had the entire elections committee there. Okay. And they said, we give you permission. Go for it. So they went in there and imaged every hard drive of every piece of equipment, all the poll pads, everything. And it was there where Misty, and I said, Misty, they're telling me these poll pads don't have internet access. She turned one on right in front of me and she said, here's the poll pad. She said, you see this big icon that's the Secretary of State? I said, well, so that means it's just got worst case encrypted connection back to the SOS, voter database. She swiped the screen to the left and she said, there's a Safari icon that my daughter watched Netflix on.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm not surprised about
I said,
that.
Well, that answers that.
Uh-huh.
And then, as recently as I think yesterday, I'm getting images from Fulton County. I've got people that are still dumpster diving.
That's about that was all there was on that call about Coffee County.
Well, tell us who that was and what the practical application is of the information that we just heard.
Okay. His name was Scott Hall. And Scott Hall is a bail bondsman in Fulton County. And he had been a person very actively involved in looking at the audits and the recounts and challenging the election in Georgia. And he called me out of the blue. I didn't really know Scott. I met him in passing for about 30 seconds one time, and I didn't really know him. And he called, and I won't go off into that too much, with a very strange demand about some of our election files. And when he did that, I turned on the recorder and talked to him for a while. And then what he says is that he was the one who arranged a team of effectively experts who had already done this in a county called Antrim County, Michigan, who had gone in and there copied the hard drives the hard drive that's of the server. But now an even bigger deal, and this is why Coffee County will ultimately be a big focal point. What we hear him say on the phone is that this team comes in and they copy the server and they copy the internal memories of all of the touch screens, the scanners, the poll pads. The poll pads are the check-in stations that look like a little iPad when you go check in and turn in your ID. So if what he is saying is true, this will be the biggest software copying, if you will, of any voting system that anybody ever has heard of. Now, it's likely that the Russians or the Chinese have probably got more at some point, but in terms of anything that's ever been reported over the years, if what Scott Hall has said is true, Coffee County is going to set a record here for the breadth of the taking of this software.
Now, tell us what is on the servers and how that applies to the state, because what's on there is not just specific to Coffee County, but it opens the door. And the reason this is so important is because it opens the door to being able to access the voting information for the entire state. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely correct. And quite frankly, it's not only the entire state, but also that software is extremely similar to the software in about 16 other states. So when somebody gets an illegal copy of the software, then they have the ability to go perfect hacks. They have the ability to explore it, figure out where the vulnerabilities are, and perfect their hacks. So to try to answer your question, which is a really good one, why is this important now? What was on that server? Well, what the server has on it is a copy of the software that runs all elections for Coffee County. It's the same one. It's the same software that runs all of the elections for Fulton and Lowndes and Wareconia and every other county. So you've got all of the software, plus it had on it the configurations for the 2020 and the January 2021 election, which that was important information, and that was probably part of the information that those who did this were looking for. But Robert, as we think about the risk of this, the big risk going forward is that this software is out there and loose in the environment with unauthorized people, where they can create hacks of the system and hack into 2022 election, 2024 election. And what the experts tell us is that Georgia's touchscreen system is so incredibly vulnerable to attack that these attacks can happen and they are not detectable. You can have all the forensic scientists you want to come in and work on it, and it'll be very unlikely that even with years of study that they could find the hack. So what we've got is a very vulnerable system, and now the software that can be used to determine how to make malware is out there in the wild.
Now, let's back up again to before the 2020 election.
Okay.
And I believe you told me that the Georgia Secretary of State made the following statement, and I believe this would have been, would this have been Raffensperger or Kemp who made this statement about the fact that, yeah, you know, the system could be hacked if bad people were allowed access, but the people we have running our elections are good folks, and bad actors aren't going to get, unauthorized people are not going to get access to our system. Is that
exactly
a statement?
Yeah, that is exactly right, Robert. And it was done by Raffensperger, actually, interestingly, in January, February of this year. He was appearing at the Atlanta Press Club for an interview. And Mark Nisi of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution asked him if he had read the experts' report about just how vulnerable the system was. And he had not read it, even though he had had it for 6 months. And he blew it off by just saying, that's not real world. You know, people can't get our software. The guy, Dr. Halderman, had access for 12 weeks to the system, and nobody has that kind of access. And he was able to do it. And he went on to say, I think it was really interesting the way he said it. I was listening and about fell out of my chair. He goes, duh, anyone can change the results if they have that kind of extended access. Well, that's exactly what we've been saying, Robert.
And that's what happened here in Coffee County. Someone was given extended access.
And how many someones is a question, because what the people claim they did was to come in and take copies or a copy of the entire server. They take it back home with them, and now they've had it at least allegedly had it since January of 2021. So they've now had it for 18 months, far longer than the University of Michigan professor had it. And the other thing we know, Robert, is that very recently in an Arizona federal case, totally unrelated to anything we're doing, but one of the guys who got his hands on the Coffee County server wrote a declaration, a sworn declaration under penalties of perjury, that he had a copy of the Coffee County server.
And this is all the way in Arizona.
All the way in Arizona. And this guy happens to live, he has 2 different homes that we know of, one in Montana and one in Washington, D.C. And then back in March, There was a guy called by the name of Russell Ramsland who testified out in Nevada that he talked about some of the details of the coffee server and how it was set up. And then he goes on and he tells the same story to a Nevada Board of County Commissioners. He tells the same story that you heard Scott Hall tell about Misty and the poll pads. He never used Misty's name, but it was pretty clear he was talking about Misty. So here's this guy in Nevada who lives in Texas saying that he's experimented with the Coffee County server. So we don't know how many hands this thing has been into.
Well, that's going to bring me to my next question, which we will get to after we take a break. We're going to take a short break here as our first segment winds down, and then we're going to come back. And what I want to get into immediately into the second segment is, why is it a problem if private individuals have this information? Now, again, as you and I have talked about this, I've been told that there was nothing on those servers that wasn't open to the public that anybody could have gotten with with an open records request, but it appears that in fact might not be the case. So I want to get into all that when we come back, but let's take a short break first, and then we'll come back and continue to explore our subject at hand today.
So I'm 12 years old. My dad buys a hardware store. Dad worked really hard. He worked 3 jobs. He taught high school science, he ran the hardware store, and he sold insurance at night. Dad's work ethic and honesty has made a big impact on me as an advisor. We learned the value of money. We learned what money could do. Working in that store, we learned what money meant to people. Being a breadwinner, taking care of family, providing a roof over our heads. You know, we worked all these years to get to this place called retirement. And whether you like to fish, golf, go to restaurants, play with the grandkids, travel, a good solid retirement income plan can help you do the things that you want to do. It allows you to retire with confidence. And at Story Wealth Management Group, we work with people in retirement and before retirement. We don't know what to expect in retirement. You've never done it before. But we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people over the last 25 years to help with that new reality called retirement. At Story Wealth Management Group, we work hard to make sure we address all the issues that may come up to help make sure that you reach your goals. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. But it's not about me. It's about your future. It's about your family. It's about your story.
Welcome back to DouglasNow.com's Beyond the Front Page with Robert Preston Jr. I am Robert Preston Jr., and we are having an enlightening and lively discussion with Marilyn Marks, the Executive Director for the Coalition for Good Governance. We're talking about a court challenge to Georgia's electronic voting system that specifically involves or has a portion that specifically involves what is happening here in Douglas and Coffee County, Georgia. So as we ended the first segment, Marilyn, you were telling us that there are people all over the country who have copies of our server from the 2020 election. And again, this is from the Dominion voting system's touchscreen system. But so what's the problem? I've been told that there's nothing on these servers that isn't available to the public with an open records request anyway. So apparently that is not exactly the case. So tell us what the problem here is.
Okay, that is in fact not at all the case, Robert. So when we think about that server, that's just the thing that operates the system, and it has all the software on it, but it's only for the election system. It doesn't have the web server and the financial system or anything for the election department. It is just election software. But that server wasn't just for the 2020 election. That server is used year in and year out, election after election. It would have been used in the last, it would have been used in the primary. And So it's one server that is used over and over because the software stays the same. Now, yes, they will have files in it for the 2019 special elections, if there no the 2020 special elections, the primary, the general. They will have special files on that server for all of those elections, but it is the basis of conducting all future elections. Now, if you heard that what was on there was just public record, no. This is proprietary software that belongs to Dominion, that is licensed by Georgia. And so part of the problem is it was proprietary, but a bigger problem is that when somebody gets the software, they can study it for vulnerabilities and study it in order to be able to hack the system for the next election. In terms of what's public, a very tiny percentage, I'm sure it's way less than 1% of the information on that server is public. What would be public would be the tabulation results or the images of the ballots, but certainly not all the software about how the system tabulates. Or you can imagine if people could get in and change that, it would be a very dangerous thing. So no, somebody's misinformed on that.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, and this is I try not to get into hyperbole and heavy-handed comments or remarks unless they're warranted, and I'm not sure if this is if this is the right time to say this or not, but I'm going to ask you, and you tell me.
All right.
Does this sound like that there's some type of cover up in the Secretary of State's office?
Well, I'll just say this, Robert. Some have certainly called it that because it is really hard to get straight answers out of the Secretary of State about whether they've done an investigation, what it entailed, whether it's going on now, because Coffee County executives and attorneys have been very candid with us, I think, and they say they have heard nothing about any kind of investigation. And they've been telling us this for months. And I believe that Misty Hampton told one of the reporters she had heard nothing about any investigation. No public documents seem to be floating around anywhere. And I think that it's hard to imagine how they're investigating anything for all this long, but not talking to anyone. And as you know, and I think you said in one of your earlier broadcasts, they came and seized Coffee County's server back about a year ago. And there's no paperwork on it whatsoever, which is just stunning. I've never heard of such a thing. That they just came and lifted the server, and they claim that they cannot get into it because someone changed the password. Well, now it has been 11 months, and they are still claiming that they cannot get into the server because someone changed the password. That doesn't sound legit. Also, I will say that Judge Totenberg, who is overseeing the case, this is a case in front of her, she has asked them a number of questions that they have just not given her the answers to. So something's wrong there. It's a big black hole.
Now, didn't the Secretary of State replace our server about a year ago?
That's what I'm talking about. Yes, when I said that he seized your
okay, so he replaced it. So if they and they've got the server, so they seized it, and now we've got a new server that doesn't solve our problem.
That's a really, really good question, Robert. Most people do not understand why that doesn't solve the problem, because the software on that is the same as the software that was copied back last year, and it's the same software as that will be used in November for the November elections and the 2024 elections, unless there's a big change in the software. But so just changing out the server and getting a new server doesn't repair the damage. It does not mitigate the risk. because the software, which is the high risk thing, is out there. One of the experts expressed it really well to another radio host not too long ago. He said, getting a copy of the server is like if you were planning to rob a bank, would you rather have kind of a blueprint and sketch of the bank, or would you rather have a working model that had the lights and the alarms in the bank vault and every possible thing that you could imagine that would be just like the bank would be built? Giving people copies of the server is giving them the working model of the bank they're going to rob.
We heard in the audio recording when we started that Mr. Hall said that he chartered a plane for people to come down here. Who actually came to Coffee County and looked at our server?
That is a really good question. We don't really know. And as you know, and I don't think we've talked about yet in this show, there are depositions that will be taken in the next few weeks. And we hope to learn the entire team that came down. The only information that we have is what Scott Hall said himself to me, that he came down and he said that he brought in the team from Michigan. And so we believe those are the people who went to Antrim, some of the same people who went to Antrim, Michigan. And what one of the reporters has put in, I believe it's the Daily Beast, he reported that a fellow by the name of Paul Maggio, who is a forensic guy in Atlanta who did go to Antrim, Michigan and did the copying there, and a guy by the name of Jeffrey Lindbergh, and he is, I believe, in New Mexico. He said that the two of them showed up on the text messages about the trip. And then I think you're aware that when we called for Paul Maggio's deposition, that he filed a notice with the court objecting and saying no, that he was going to take the Fifth Amendment on this. Well, that's not what you do. You have to show up and say it in person. But so that we have reason to believe that he was one of the ones, but we don't know the whole team. And what we do know about it is coming from a reporter who had seen Misty Hampton's text messages.
Interesting. So one of the things that I'm picking up on is as we continue to move forward with the various directions that this challenge is going, and as we peel back more and more layers, we're getting as many questions as we are answers.
At least. Yes. I think we have way more questions than we have answers.
Now, as we wrap up here, a couple of more things, and I think this sort of hopefully will provide some perspective for exactly what the goal is and where we're headed. Because when I've talked to people over the last couple of days, what I've said is there are two sort of different, not really narratives, but two different planks to this issue that are coming together to form one. And there's the lawsuit that the Coalition for Good Governance began, the litigation that began back 5 years ago. And now we have the election of 2020 and all the various stuff around it. And that's what's got the national media involved here. So, again, and I know we've mentioned this, but I think it's worth mentioning again that your challenge is not specific to 2020.
Not at all.
And it will not answer the questions, regardless of what the resolution is. It will not answer the questions that people have raised in the aftermath of the 2020 election, correct?
That is absolutely correct, because what we're looking at is the security of the system going forward. Our case has always been a forward-looking case and saying, Your Honor, please, this system is so risky. Please do not let it be used in the next election. And so we are not backward looking about, okay, what happened in 2020? did Trump get more votes or did Biden get more votes? It's not about that. This is about the risk of this system going forward. And just so you know, our solution is very simple. It's not to throw the Dominion system out into the landfill. It's to take those touchscreens, put them in the landfill, but use the scanners, the servers, the poll pads with hand-marked paper ballots. It would be just like your absentee ballots that you get in the mail, but just hand them over the desk. This is the way 70% of Americans vote, on with paper and pen that can't be hacked, and run it through the scanners, the Dominion scanners, and then audit. And you've got a perfectly simple, good system that even if somebody hacks the scanners, they can't hack the ultimate result so long as you audit it, because nobody can hack. You're putting the pen to the paper.
I've made a statement several times that elections are only secure as the people who oversee those elections. And that is true with regard to the computer systems, the touchscreens that we've been using. A paper ballot system that you're advocating for would still be safe and still be secure, even if someone running the election or overseeing the election wasn't necessarily a person of high integrity, correct?
That's the way I see it. Absolutely. Because if we as citizens do our job with good bipartisan oversight of the elections, that we have our watchers there, we make sure that both parties are represented, we watch all the ballot boxes get sealed and locked, then absolutely we shouldn't have to have people, Mother Teresa, running all of the elections. There are just not enough Mother Teresas to go around. we need to have a solid system that we don't have to rely on that, hey, computer hackers can't get in. We need to have the system that can prove itself, that is evidence-based, that can withstand a challenge. And as we've watched in 2020 in Georgia, the current system cannot withstand a challenge.
I want to mention one last thing in conclusion. And the only reason I'm going to mention this is because as we were getting ready to sign on, we talked about it briefly. The narrative from the national media, and it may not be out there yet, but it's coming. And this is where the momentum from their coverage is building, is an attempt to make a connection between what happened in 2020 in Coffee County and what happened on January 6th. And some of the investigators believe that some of the same players who were involved with looking at our server may have some involvement in what happened on January 6th. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, yes. That there were ties to Giuliani, to Patrick Byrne, who we heard about in today's hearing, this afternoon's hearing, and who had ties to Sidney Powell. And so, yes, there are ties there. I think that is why the reporters who have been covering this in the national press are the same ones who've been covering the January 6th hearings, because of those ties. As you probably know, they've talked some about the draft executive orders where people were wanting Trump to sign them and seize all the voting systems in the United States. Well, Coffee County is mentioned in the draft executive orders. And so Coffee County was already on the national horizon, and we just didn't know it back in December of 2020. Lots more to the story to learn.
And again, that's what I was talking about earlier. As you peel back the layers and get below the surface, there's a lot happening. And again, it's to some degree or to a large degree independent of what the Coalition for Good Governance wants to accomplish with getting rid of touchscreen a touchscreen voting system, because that's ultimately what your goal is. Now there's some other goals that people are looking at with regard to some of these players who have been referred to in other media outlets as bad actors. Now, again, those are their words, not ours, but that's where that term is coming from, and that's what the connection. Yeah, and of course, we know how January 6th and Trump and all that, it still continues to dominate the national narrative. So again, what happened here in Coffee County is a part of that discussion as well. So.
Right. And I think that when you're the scientists look at this and say, once that software gets loose, you don't know where it's going. You can't tell whether it's going to the angels or the devils, right? I mean, you get so many copies out there. You can't start making moral judgments that, oh, only the good guys have it or only the bad guys have it. And so I think their point is it can easily get into bad actors' hands. Our point is to the court, look, Secretary Raffensperger's defense has collapsed. His defense of his system was, oh, no bad guys can ever get this. Nobody outside the trusted election officials can ever get their hands on this. Well, Coffee County proves that that's not true.
Well, it is going to be fascinating to see where this goes. And again, we've got subpoenas, we've got depositions, we've got a lot that's going to continue to happen. And we will continue to talk as needed as these developments take place, and when there's news and items up for discussion. So, Marilyn, thank you very much for taking time and spending it with us today. And
well, thank you and your audience.
Well, we will be in touch moving forward, and we will give this more coverage and continue to stay up to date on any and all developments. And again, we will have you back as these developments take place. So thank you again.
Anytime.
All right.
Take care now.
Thank you. All right. That's Marilyn Marks with the Coalition, the Executive Director for the Coalition of Good Governance. Again, just an absolutely fascinating discussion. We barely scratched the surface. And I think that the take home message here today is they're really, it's not two issues, but it's pretty close to being two issues. You have what the Coalition for Good Governance started 5 years ago, which is to get rid of any touchscreen voting system. All right. And the battleground where this fight is waging is in Georgia. And hopefully, if the Coalition for Good Governance gets the ruling that it wants, then once other states see, hey, they don't like those touchscreen systems down in Georgia, we probably need to change ours. We can get rid of the touchscreen systems that are used in other states. That's the overarching goal. But particularly with regard to 2020, some of these individuals who have been involved in scanning our server could potentially have some involvement in what happened on January 6th. And of course, we've got hearings going on, congressional hearings going on about that right now. Plenty of stories in the national media. And that's why the national folks have jumped on this. I mean, this stuff's been going on for 5 years. You haven't heard anything about it until now. And this is in the post-2020 world, the post-Trump world. But as Marilyn was saying, this is not about Trump. This is not about Biden. This is not about any specific election. They're not looking at 2020, 2022, the election that just happened, a few weeks ago. They're not looking at that. They're looking ahead to November, to 2024. If we continue, and I say we as in Georgia, we continue to use this system according to what Ms. Marks and her organization believe, the entire election system in Georgia has been compromised by what took place allegedly in Coffee County. And that's the danger. And listen, I've talked about the integrity of elections, and I think that the integrity of our elections is a cornerstone of our country. All right. And I think that we need to settle this. And I've had several conversations with Ms. Marks about the different tentacles of this issue. And there's some pretty some pretty disturbing stuff. And again, we all know from our personal computers, our phones, what have you, that anything can be hacked. And that's what she and her organization are advocating for, is a hack-free system. It's not pro-Republican or pro-Democrat or pro-whatever. It is simply, let's get rid of the touchscreen system. And the reason why is because if unauthorized individuals are allowed access to the servers and to the technology, then that could potentially be used down the road. And according to what we know, that's what's happened here in Coffee County, that unauthorized individuals don't know if their intentions are good or bad or what their intentions are. That we don't know that. But the fact of the matter is, according to what we have now, unauthorized individuals have gained access to our servers. What they're going to do with it, who knows? Might do nothing with it. Might have no plans to do anything whatsoever. But it's out there. And as she said, it's been to Texas, it's been to Nevada, it's been to Arizona, it's been all over. So it's more than just the individuals who came to Douglas and checked it out. It is much, much more than that. So where does it go? Who knows? Who knows? We've got, again, deposition subpoenas, a lot of different directions that we can go with this thing. We'll keep you informed as these developments take place. Again, we got some folks right here from Coffee County who will have to give depositions. And the other thing I want to mention real quickly, right now, this is a civil case. Okay. And that's something that people need to understand. We should have mentioned it earlier. This is a civil case. It is not a criminal case. Nobody right now is being charged, going to be charged, set to be charged, nothing like that. This is not a criminal case. Could it turn into a criminal case? Who knows? It very well might, depending upon where the investigations go and where, what comes out in these subpoenas and in these depositions. It's not a criminal case, not yet. Okay. Now, again, what happens moving forward, who knows? It's still very early in the process. But again, need to make sure that we make that abundantly clear. This is not a criminal case. It is a civil matter right now. And there's still a lot to take place. But again, as you peel back these layers, you see some of these individuals involved. And that's what the national folks are going to go for. That's going to make the headlines in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, with the Daily Beast and the Washington Post and all these other outlets that are covering this. That's the connection they're trying to look for. They're trying to make a connection between the election security breach, allegedly, of course, that took place in Coffee County, and the January 6th incident at the Capitol. So a lot to handle, a lot to process, a lot to talk about. We're going to continue to cover it moving forward. Thank you guys for watching. We appreciate it as always. If you have questions about this, feel free to ask questions in the comments. Send us questions. We'll do our best to answer them. And who knows, we might get some feedback that will lead us to a future show. But we're going to continue to cover this as we move forward. Y'all have a wonderful week. Everybody stay safe. It's hot outside. Stay cool, especially if you're down here in Southeast Georgia where we are. It is nasty, 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 extremely hot, dangerously hot. Everybody stay safe out there. We'll see you next week. You've been watching Beyond the Front Page with Robert Preston Jr. I am Robert Preston Jr. Until next time.